So we're going to get started. I am so excited to welcome you to Flirting Without Fear. I'm your host, Dr. Pavini Moray, and this webinar is part of a series of free monthly webinars that Wellcelium offers to our students and to our audiences. And we are an online transformative educational platform really committed to helping you live your best romantic life, your best sexual life, your best embodied life, and giving you the skills that you need to do that. So we've asked, like, what do folks need? What do you need in order to feel confident as an erotic being on the planet? And the answer back that we got, that, oh gosh, we really need help with flirting skills. And I think this is such a beautiful topic to cover, and that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because so many folks are dealing with it. So many folks want to be flirtatious, especially now during COVID. And it's just like, how do I even do that, right? How do I initiate flirting? How do I open to receive flirting? How do I know when someone's flirting? How do I know when I'm flirting? So today, what we're going to be covering is some skills for flirting. Flirting with confidence, flirting without fear, flirting in a way that is respectful and that makes you feel really empowered. And so we'll be talking about some of the implications of flirting, what to do if you want to be effective in your flirting, and also what not to do. And so I'll be talking through the first part of the webinar, and then right at the end there'll be some time for Q&A. And in the you can either put that into the Q&A box on the bottom of your screen or into the chat, and I'll be taking a few questions. Everyone who signed up will get the replay of this webinar. And if we don't have time to get to all of the questions, I'll make sure to send something out with some responses. So welcome. And I'm going to just ask folks right now to type into the chat, what's one word that comes to mind when you think about flirting? Go ahead and type that in now. One word comes to mind when you think about flirting. Scary, inadequacy. Anybody else? One word about flirting? Exciting, great. Yeah, so I mean, it kind of spans the spectrum from exciting, woohoo, new energy, new people, to oh my God, I'm terrified, right? This is really, really scary. So let's just get a shared definition of what even is flirting, because I know that that can be a point of confusion sometimes. So this is my definition. It doesn't have to be yours. But flirting is a playful way to convey interest in another person. It's lighthearted. It doesn't have a high cost of admission. If you flirt with someone and they don't flirt back, you're not facing a huge crushing rejection, because maybe they picked up on your signs and maybe they didn't. I think of flirting as a fun way to practice being erotically confident. And you can flirt with anyone, right? Flirting does not have to be sexualized in nature. In fact, I think some of the best flirting isn't. It's just this lighthearted, gentle invitation into the playful aspects of being human. You can flirt with babies, you can flirt with dogs. I often flirt with plants when I'm on my morning walk. You can flirt with your grandma, you can flirt with clouds. This bringing playful energy, bringing aliveness through into your encounters, right? And of course, there's many different kinds of flirting, and we'll talk about some of those. And while it is playful in nature, flirting isn't trivial. It requires a lot of finely tuned skills, including you're tracking your own body language, you're tracking someone else's body language, you're being creative, you're taking risks, you're assessing the situation, and you're offering empathy. So flirting is really an art, maybe one of the the lost arts. Whether you're looking for a partner or you're just relating to a potential customer or you just want to be playful with a friend, flirting lets you signal your interest to someone in small increments. And if they are interested and if they read your signals, they'll flirt back. And this subtly cues to us our relationship status with each other. So when you think about someone you know who seems, at least on the outside, both flirtatious and confident. So just go ahead and think about somebody you know who you admire. And maybe this person doesn't take their flirting too seriously. They're not a player. They're not just trying to get laid. They're not trying to manipulate by being charming. They're just genuinely appreciative of other beings, right? They're in touch with their own sexuality and they feel good about sharing it. So just think about somebody that you know who's like that. And when you think about that, what's a quality of that person? And if you don't know anybody, maybe you can think of a character you've seen in a film or read about in a book. What's a quality of that person that's related to their flirting? What do you admire? What do you notice? And go ahead and just, again, drop that into the chat, please, if you don't mind. Funny, confident. What else? Presence, for sure. They are fully present. Good. So those qualities that you just noticed are, of course, things that we can all practice, right? We can all practice confidence. We can all practice presence. And there is a relationship between flirting and confidence, but it might not be what you think it is, right? So flirting is a series of skills that anybody can practice, anybody can learn. And the more confident that you feel, the more comfortable you will be flirting, right? That's kind of the general premise of like, oh, confident people are good at flirting. But however, the inverse is also true. The better you get at flirting, the more confident you'll actually feel, right? And so if it's something that you can practice, you can then really up your confidence level across the board. So there's been a lot of research done on flirting, and some of it's conflicting, a lot of it's done on heterosexual folks, but there's some pretty interesting stuff that's out there. So one, and I'm going to reference a couple things through the course of our time together. One study that was done at the University of Kansas talks about that there's 5 different flirting styles. So those are traditional, I'll talk about each one. Traditional, physical, sincere, playful, and polite. And just as you hear those words, traditional, physical, sincere, playful, and polite, do you have a sense of your own style? The traditional flirting is those roles of pursuer and pursued. Often this is really present in heterosexual flirting dynamics, right? People who are physical flirts are relying on eye contact, on body language, on movement to get their point across. They're not necessarily using words. Flirts who are sincere are those who are really interested in establishing an emotional connection, right? So they are going to be the ones who ask a question, who give a compliment in order to break the ice. This is really probably the most common form of flirting, is the sincere type. You see someone who's across the room and you really want to break the ice by telling them about how you like something that they're wearing or asking them a question about something that they're reading. And sometimes when you're in that sincere type of flirting, you don't even know what your interest is. Is it romantic? Is it sexual? Or is it just like, that looks like an interesting human that I want to engage with? And then the playful flirting style is silly, easy, lighthearted. Often there's a lot of humor. And the polite style is often the least obvious, right? It's often how introverted people flirt. And it's very respectful. And I'm not saying that any of these, I think all of these are seeking to make some kind of connection, right? And then the polite, there's also, there's like a reserve, right? And the upside of this kind of flirting is that it's really very genuine. And so if you notice that someone who's a polite flirt is flirting with you, you can trust that it's like they're really interested, right? The downside of it is that sometimes it's hard to tell, or sometimes it's, if you are a polite flirt, it's hard to get your message across, right? So yeah, if that is a helpful frame to think about, like, oh, what's my typical flirting style? And I think that, we could probably, most of us could move through some of those, if not all of those styles, but that there are different styles, and that there's not one that's better or worse. However, we're going to talk in a little bit about like what makes effective flirting. But before we get to that, I want to just tackle this part about fear, anxiety, nervousness, right? So when you like someone or when you're interested in someone, flirting can feel like a really big deal, right? I'm sure some of us have had that experience of seeing someone who we find attractive or we have interest in, and then there's that like, I can't even say hi to them, right? I can't even talk, like where I talk about like tuna fish, or, something ridiculous, right? Like the more nervous you get, right, the worse your flirting game gets, right? And this is, of course, normal, right? It's the way that our brains are wired, and that fear, being in a fear response and flirting actually can't really happen at the same time, because your energy in fear is directed towards survival, right? And so, of course, the fear of rejection impacts your capacity to flirt. As you know, about the complexity of the organ that's our brain, when we are in our back brain, when we're in our brain stem, we're just focused on avoiding harm, right? Getting out of the situation, surviving the situation, right? And it's not the kind of easy confidence that comes when we're relaxed and in ourselves and present, where we can joke and bring humor to the situation. So if you are experiencing a lot of nervousness and a lot of fear, like before you can even kind of think about flirting, you need to tend to that. And it's not that you won't have a little bit of stage fright, right? But if it's paralyzing, or if it's, really, you're having a deep embodied experience of, oh my God, they're going to reject me if I look at them, right? You need to tend to that part of yourself. You need to do the things that you know how to do that bring you back to center, that bring you back to a calm equilibrium in your body, yeah, where you're relaxed and can connect with your erotic self, your sexy, so that you can bring a little bit of that. When you're afraid to flirt, it's usually a combination of things that might be happening, and it could be one thing or any of these put together. You might not be as confident as you would like to be, right? You might be experiencing just some low self-esteem in general, which makes it hard to feel confident when you're flirting. You might have some past negative experiences of rejection that you're working hard on healing, right? And you also might be worried about inadvertently crossing a boundary. This is that polite style, right? You want to be so consensual. You want to be so careful. And then that nervousness can really prevent that free flow of flirting. So there's the body-based stuff to do of really centering, grounding in your own experience in your own body. I'm sure you have some skills for that. There's always more tools that you can learn. But there's also just some like basic strategies aside from those of knowing when and where to flirt, right? Knowing how to flirt. What are some of the basic strategies? How to stay with yourself when you're extending that flirt energy a little bit, right? Because really the best flirting does come from that deeply embodied place. The flirter is really feeling themselves. They're feeling their attraction. when they're making that bid for attention. So obviously some places are appropriate for flirting, some places are not, sometimes are, sometimes aren't. So for example, let's talk about what's not appropriate, like flirting at work, never appropriate, right? It's even with coworkers who are at the same kind of level as you, there are places and times where you might be with coworkers that it might be appropriate to flirt, but like in the workplace, it's not gonna, it's not appropriate, and it might cross other HR boundaries that your company has or wherever you work has. There are other situations that really require a slow and thoughtful approach to flirting. If it is sexualized in nature. So I talked about like flirting with trees, flirting with your grandma, flirting with clouds, right? That's just like a playful invitation into that spark of aliveness, which is really different than, hey, I think I might want something more with that person, either romantic, emotional, physical. And so it's imbued with that quality, right? So slowing down and having a sense if that's present, if there's an erotic charge or a sexual charge that's present, can be really helpful, especially when there are power differentials like teacher-student, boss-employee. It's just, I think it's good practice to not flirt in those situations, right? Because there's really a not so fine line between flirting and sexual harassment, or making someone uncomfortable with unwanted sexual advances. When you're like, what, I was just flirting. It really, part of being good at flirting means that you are gauging the subtle nuances of someone's response to you, that you're testing the waters just a tiny bit at a time. You know, it's just a little flirt, it's just a little smile, before moving towards bolder moves, shall we say. So when's it appropriate? Obviously, there's places where we go to flirt. And like right now, I think that's mostly online, just because of kind of the situation that we're in with the pandemic. There's been a lot of online speed dating events. So that might be a place that you could practice your flirting skills. You can flirt online over social media, or on dating apps or dating sites. In-person places, of course, are like clubs, bars, dance parties, weddings, right? Places that it's kind of, that's the norm and that's what's expected. And yeah, it's like if you are able to practice, right? If you're able to build in this level of confidence, you're like the discernment around the nuance of when, where, and with who is going to get easier and easier. You're probably going to make mistakes, and that's okay. Like being flirtatious it's about taking a slight risk. And if you stumble a little bit, it's okay, right? It's because it's not a super highly invested situation. It's not highly charged. So who to flirt with, right? Obviously, flirt with people who are flirtable. And you'll know that they are flirtable because they are showing you that they have an open body language, right? Maybe they're making eye contact with you. If someone is like this, you know, they're not flirtable. They're not available to be approached. And if you're doing that, you're not available to be approached, right? So if their nose is in a book, if they're looking at their phone, if they're in a conversation, those are clear signs that this person is not available to be flirted with, right? However, if they are sitting up, if they're looking around, they're making eye contact, if they're smiling at you, you can flirt a little bit, and you can, and we'll talk a little bit more about the specifics of that. If people smile at you, if they look at you and then they touch their hair, they touch their face, or they touch their chest, those are subtle body language cues that I'm available to be flirted with, or I'm available to flirt with you. Yeah. So this thing about like what makes flirting effective? How do we know if what we're doing is actually going to work, right? And sometimes in your flirting, you're kind of casting a wide net. You don't have a particular goal in mind, right? You're just like, oh, that there's a sparkle, there's a tingle. Like, let's just see what happens if I give a smile here. And sometimes you're like, oh man, I wanna get with that person. I wanna have a date with them. I wanna have sex with them. Like, I like that person, right? So obviously you have different goals for your flirting. And so depending on what your goal is, depends on how effective it is, right? So I want to just tell you a little bit about some of the research on flirting. And this is from the University of Nicosia. The researchers asked a ton of people to think about people that had successfully flirted with them in the past. And they then gathered all of those criteria of like, okay, what makes successful flirting? And they were able to distill it down to a list of traits and behaviors. And so I'm going to share this with you. And many of those are things that you included when I asked you to think about somebody you know who's good at flirting. So the traits are that their nonverbal behavior includes an intense gaze, a nice smile, and how they approach, right? That they are good looks, good dressing, charm, hygiene, personal hygiene, intelligence, that the person is humorous. This was named again and again as one of the top effective ways to flirt, is to get someone to laugh. Their interesting personality, that they have a gentle approach, that they're respectful, that they're patient, and that they're kind. That they display strong interest and romance, that they're tender, there's nice compliments that are specific to the person, intense, clear interest. That they're courageous and determined, that they are connected with their own desire and they're direct about it. The last ones are really sweet. An air of mystery, that they have unusual hobbies or have some kind of originality, that they are cheerful, spontaneous, and positive, and that there's a shared interest, common shared interest. And that might be like a shared identity or a shared hobby, or that there's some kind of common characteristics. So those are the traits and behaviors of successful flirting as conducted in this research of like, okay, so can I think about, I'm thinking about you, can you think about, in that list of 9 behaviors and traits, like where are my strengths? Where am I really strong? Am I good with my eye contact? Right? Am I good with paying specific, unique compliments? Am I good with approaching gently? Am I good with humor? Because like, you're not going to be good at all the things, right? Like no one is, but like, where are your strengths? Right? And so in my opinion, the art of flirting is really about accentuating your own strengths, right? So if you are a fabulous dresser, I mean, obviously that's going to be part of your flirting style. If you are funny, you're going to bring that, right? If you have an interesting hobby, you're going to share that, right? If you're an international man of mystery, you will allude to it vaguely. So what else is going to be effective here? This idea of being flirtable, right? Of if you are interested in practicing flirting, you want to experience it from both sides, being both the flirtee and the flirter, right? And hopefully there's a mutual exchange. And so that means adopting some of these behaviors, right, of being open, being approachable, wearing something that someone can comment on, right, something with a story. Like you could have a fabulous piece of jewelry or really cool, unique shoes or something that's going to get that attention, that someone, it's like an opening. You're offering them an opening, right? This piece about, dressing for success, right? Of allowing that your confidence, I think, to really be present on your body. And that means for you, right? What does it mean to dress for success for you? That you feel like if you feel schlumpy, you're not going to be very flirtable, are you? Right? So it's like, what does it mean for me to put on clothing that really makes me feel good about myself, right? Open body language. So for this miracle of eye contact, and this was in my own life a really big learning. I think I was in college when I figured out that if I just like, I was spending a lot of time in bars then at that point in my life, but if I just would like meet someone's eye and then hold their eye contact at a party, at a bar, at an event, like they would often approach me or I could approach them, right? And the natural shyness, the introversion about like kind of like looking away or looking down or like not indicating interest, if I just made eye contact, it was like, oh, that's so easy. This is how it works. Oh, I didn't know. So there's 3 different kinds of ways to work with eye contact. One is if you are wanting to be flirtable, that is, to have this room encompassing glance, right? Where you're just sweeping the entire room slowly. I'm doing it right now in my room. 5 to 10 seconds. You're not making eye contact with anybody. You're just kind of like indicating your openness because your eyes are slowly moving across the room. So just go ahead and give that a try now. Just take 5 seconds to slowly sweep your room. And we're going to do it one more time. And this time I'm going to invite you to just like be flirtable as you do it. Take a breath, be flirtable. Great. So the next thing that we're going to practice is the short darting glance. So this is a 2 to 3 second glance sideways at a person of interest. So just imagine that next to you right now, there is maybe about, well, at least 6 feet away, maybe further, somebody who you're like, oh yeah, that person, like them. Okay, so I'm going to just ask you to do the short darting glance, which is to look at them, turn your head a little bit, look at them for 2 to 3 seconds, and then look back. So just do that. Just notice on a body level what's happening as you do that. Like, can you stay connected with yourself? Try it again. Yeah, how'd that go? And then the third one is the one that I talked about in my story, which is the gaze fixate. So you're going to make eye contact with a person of interest for 3 seconds or more. And you want to think about like what the rest of your face is doing. So like you're not just glaring at them, right? Like how are you feeling? Are you feeling an invitation? Are you feeling like you are inviting them to come to you? Are you inviting an invitation from them? But like that, you're generating internally that sense of like, yeah, let's connect for a minute, right? So just find that and then just imagine a person you're interested in, and then just like, let's try 4 seconds. And then let's add a smile at the end. Okay, good. So those 3 techniques for eye contact, the room encompassing glance, the short darting glance, and the gaze fixate are 3 ways that you can really intentionally practice with your flirting. And I'm going to ask you right now, can you all, can you see yourselves on your camera? If you can't, go ahead and make that so that you can actually see yourself. And if you can't do that, maybe you could hold up your phone. Because what I want you to practice right now is noticing what your available look looks like. And you can do this later in the mirror if you want as well. What does your available look like? And what does your unavailable look like? And what does it feel like, right? So like, let's try unavailable first. So just like go right to unavailable. Notice what's happening inside your body as you go to unavailable. Okay, shake that off. And let's try available. Notice how that feels in your body. Good. Anything you notice from available, unavailable, or any of the gazes that you want to drop in the chat would be great right now. I'd love to hear it. What did you notice? Unavailable looks like they are having a bad day. For sure. A clear difference from being closed for contact and being open. Almost from grumpy to happy. Yeah, good. Available look was, I felt it once, mischievous, confident, secretive, and direct. Good. Yeah, and I just want to say that, like, just because you have the closed for business sign or the open for business sign, it doesn't, like, it's important for you. And if you're being flirtable, it's super important. But like, sometimes people are just really obtuse, right? And like, they're not picking up on your cues. And this, and I just want to especially name in the situation of, if you're closed for business, if you're like, I am clearly unavailable to be flirted with right now, and someone tries anyway, like, that's on them, right? It's not on your lack of not being unavailable enough or something. It's just like, they're not reading the cues or whatever, they're on their own trip. So just know that. So this idea of invitation when flirting, right? Of like asking to receive an invitation or offering an invitation, right? Where am I directing that? How am I turning my body towards that? How am I opening my body to that? And how am I staying present with my own self as I do that, right? So I'm making I think this sound a lot more complicated than it is, because often the best flirting techniques, the ones that you're going to practice, are the simplest. So if you if you see someone that if you notice someone that you're interested in, and you don't have to know what the interest is, right? You don't always know right away. But it's like, the first thing is to just feel into that part of you that's excited about that connection, right? And people watching can be really great for this, of going into, I think that there's enough public places, I mean, depending on your level of comfort with it, but, you know, just, you can start to notice your attractions, just being in a public place and people watching, right? And when there's somebody who catches your attention, like, nothing has to happen out of that, but it's just like, oh, what's that actually feel like, right? Feel into that part of you that's like, oh, that just, like, there's a little bit of like a zing or a lightning bolt, or like something like just jumped inside, something moved, something, I felt something, right? So feeling into that part. And if you want to, I mean, we talked about some eye contact ways to make approach. If you want to do some of the other gentle approaches, right? You can just walk up to someone and say, hi, I wanted to introduce myself to you, right? I mean, it's nice if you have a reason why you want to introduce yourself, but you can also just say, like, hey, I want to introduce myself. You looked really interesting. Or, hi, I'm curious about that book you're reading. Or, hi, how's your day going? You know, one thing to note, this is again out of the research, is that if you ask for a small favor, like, oh, hey, do you know what time it is? And that person responds affirmatively, it's called the foot in the door technique, right? Of that, then and of course, like, I mean, lots of unscrupulous people are also aware of the foot in the door technique, right? But you don't have to use it for ill gain, right? You can be ethical with it. But that the research shows that like when someone responds affirmatively to a small ask, or, oh, hey, do you know where, do you know where the store is? And they could tell you, then you have your foot in the door and you can open another line of conversation. You know, how's your day going? Great, yeah. And then that can lead to, like, do you want to grab some coffee? Just wondering. And because what the research showed was actually that when a researcher, unknown, the research they did, the researcher would approach someone, in this case it was on a college campus, and they would ask for a small favor like that, like, what time is it? Where's the admin building? And then the next question would be, do you want to grab a coffee? No other conversation. That when they made that small ask first, the person who they made it of was like twice as likely to say yes to a stranger for a coffee date, right? Because I think why is that you've had time to suss it a little bit. The person who's receiving the ask has had time to let it land on their body, and they're like, oh, okay, that went okay. So sure, like having a coffee isn't that big of a deal, right? This initiating a conversation, it can, obviously if someone's practicing being flirtable and they're wearing something really great, that's a great entry point for you of, hey, that's a great hat, what's the story about it, right? Asking a question, that call to action of like, initiate it, instead of just saying, oh, that's a great hat, ask that follow-up question so they have something to respond to, right? Keeping it light, using your body language to communicate your intentions. So open, relaxed arms and stance, hands down, turning towards them, but maybe not like full frontal, because that's a little bit intense. It could be like 45 degrees. So these subtle movements to build safety. If you can get them to laugh, or if you laugh, if they say anything remotely funny, right? We talked about humor as one of the most effective ways to flirt. And that laughter, it really is connecting, right? It relaxes our nervous system. It lets us discharge any nervous energy. It's like, oh, we're just humans together sharing a funny moment, right? So I'm really thinking about that. And then just this last piece around sometimes it's going to work. Sometimes you're going to flirt and the person's going to like totally read your signals and you're going to get like a really warm, positive response. And sometimes it's going to be a no. Like sometimes they're not going to be interested in that. Sometimes they're not going to be available. You've misread them. Sometimes they're not even going to read it as flirting, right? And I think that what I would recommend, right? Because like basically what we're doing is building rejection resilience. We're getting good at hearing and feeling no. For the sake of, because when we ask more, we get more, right? And so to not, to really set an intention of like, I'm practicing getting good at flirting. I'm going to hear no a lot, and that's going to be an opportunity for me to practice hearing no. And I'm going to be practicing my rejection resiliency when I'm doing that. And that's great. Like that's part of being a good flirt, right? This art of flirting is that it's okay for me to hear no. It's because it's just a little risk. It's not going to devastate me, right? And I'm going to practice not taking it personally, right? Like I have no idea what's going on with that person at that moment. Like maybe if I had approached 5 minutes later, it would have been a yes. We just don't know. And so like our brain loves to make stories, like all the shame, unworthiness stuff, right? Like how do you like inoculate yourself? Just be like, my intention is to practice and to just not take this too seriously. So the suggestion, and we're going to move to questions here in a second. The suggestion is to practice flirting lightly, in any of those styles. You could try on the different styles if you want, but with 3 to 5 people a day for 7 days. Just do a week of flirting practice. You might want to even keep either written notes or verbal notes or some kind of like way to track what the information is that you're inside this experiment and that you're getting, right? And then at the end of that 7 days practice to just be like, okay, these are the things that I've learned. This is how I felt then, and this is how I feel now. Because really it is the practice of these skills that are where your confidence is going to come from. Nobody expects anybody else to be just like naturally great, right? Like we get to learn this stuff. So I want to end there, and I want to invite you to type your questions either into the chat or into the Q&A, and I'll see if I can answer them for you. Any questions that you have about flirting? Okay, so I'm going to read the question and then I'll talk about the answer. So scared of flirting with someone who is taken. Like it's my mistake for not knowing and crossing that boundary. How do I deal with that? This is a great question. And just from the question, it's that wanting to be so respectful, wanting to be so consensual, not wanting to get it wrong, right? And the thing is, like, I don't know, how I think about it is, I think most relationships that are thriving have space for flirtation in them, right? That like if you flirt with somebody who is in a relationship, and even if that relationship is a closed relationship, that if it's a thriving relationship, like it's okay, you know, I mean, it feels good when someone conveys interest in you. I mean, if it's wanted, right? Obviously not if it's not wanted, but like, I mean, what an honor to, and I've definitely had that happen of like receiving attention that I wasn't available for whatever reason. But feeling like, oh, thank you. Like that feels really good. Like I appreciate that, you know, it just made my day. And I think if you think about it like that, like, have you had that happen where somebody has approached and maybe you weren't interested or you weren't available for whatever reason, but it's like still really nice, right? And if there's a, you know, I can't fathom every situation, but if there was, if you did cross a boundary with somebody and they're like, oh, actually, you know, I'm really not available for that kind of flirtation. I mean, I think it's a really simple, like, thanks for letting me know. I appreciate that. You know, it's like, you can't know until you know. You can't do better until you have had the experience, right? Like if that person clearly told you ahead of time, like, I'm not available for that, then you wouldn't do it. So I hope that's helpful. Okay, next question. I notice that when I'm open, I can receive lots of unwanted attention, which makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, totally. Any advice for that? I wonder about the directionality of the invitation, right? And just to say, like, I am sorry you were getting unwanted attention. That sucks, full stop. And it shouldn't be true that if you like relax and open, then that just like opens the floodgates for whatever, right? It's not cool. And I wonder if there's a nuance here of like that for you, it's not the scanning the room technique, but maybe it's like it's the sideways glance at somebody who you are willing to receive that information from, right? So it doesn't it's directed and specific of like, who am I issuing that invitation to? It's not, I'm not casting a wide net. I am like opening the door for only very specific interactions. And I think the other, like the piece about feeling uncomfortable, I wish that wasn't like it seems to me, you know, the question before you, the person was really worried about making someone feel uncomfortable. And I think that we should be a little bit worried about that. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. And it sucks that it makes you feel uncomfortable, you know, because it's not your responsibility. But I get that that's the impact of it. And yeah, and I think just like the clarity of knowing that you are like, just because someone directs that at you, you are in no way responsible for any part of what happens next, right? Of like, you don't have to be nice, you don't have to smile, you don't have to say thank you, you don't have to be gracious. You can just ignore it, or you can just say no thanks, or you know, you can flip them off, or like, and there's a plethora of ways to respond that don't. And I just wonder if maybe practicing having that agency of like just really not taking that on, and that's not mine, might be helpful. Okay. So I'm gonna pop over to the chat. Wondering if feeling that fun zing when you do catch eye contact, what if it was just me? Yeah, this is great. And so because flirting happens in small incremental moments, right? Like if it's not just you, it will happen again, right? Like you can do one of those eye contact techniques. You could initiate a short conversation. Like one of you can take it to the next step, right? Of like, and if it was just you, then like how beautiful that you got to have that experience in your body, and like bummer that it was just you, right? Not trying to sugarcoat it, but that it's almost like progressive consent, right? Flirting is, and so it will happen again if it's not just you, and if it is just you, like it's awesome. Your body can feel like that too. I'm a femme lesbian and always find flirting risky because I feel like I'm offending or scaring straight women. Can you talk about queer flirting and maybe the ways female-bodied people are conditioned not to flirt, or how you and others you've known have worked with that? Yeah, sure. Queer flirting. It's true that like we have definitely had experiences where someone's flirtations have been unwelcome, and it's possible that we might flirt and offend someone, or our flirtations might be unwelcome, right? We might have misgauged. It's possible, and it's not our intention to do it. And it is always a little bit of a risk. And again, like just like how I responded about the part about being uncomfortable from it, it's like that is just part of the, you know, like if you do scare someone, I mean, obviously you're going to stop, right? You're not going to continue to push in if it's clear that it's not welcome attention. And yeah, let me think if there's anything about queer flirting. Oh, I'm just thinking about like I went to several queer speed dating events recently, and oh, folks were so awkward, and like that was what I really noticed, was just like kind of like the I don't know how to do this, right? What else? I mean, I think that the kind of the premises are similar. I think queers can be really creative with their flirting, like the whole like I'm going to send you some snail mail, or I'm going to make you a patch, or gonna, you know, that there's other ways that queers convey interests that are outside the dominant heterosexual paradigm that are really beautiful. And I wonder about like leaning into maybe some of those. I'm thinking about somebody who I flirted with once, who I flirted in a queer way of like giving this present, and like they were like, whoa, you know, and it was, I just misread the cues, and like whatever, it didn't work, you know, but it didn't mean that I was somehow wrong for trying. It just meant that like it didn't work out, right? And so like again, that resilience around it of being a femme lesbian and getting to enjoy flirting and trusting that you will respond appropriately to people's boundaries. Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to take one more question here. Okay. So I'm going to summarize the question. If you have internalized something that makes your desires feel bad, right? That and you're worried that your desires are dangerous or going to harm others or detrimental to others, right? And that's because of your past trauma history. How to be an adult with this, how to learn to trust your desires, and that your desires, just because you have them, aren't going to do harm. I would say that this is like it's a big life work, right? Of learning to lean into our desires and trust, especially if we've been pathologized for them, or if it's been complicated with trauma at all. Like it's big work of undoing it, right? And just like any big undoing work, it's like discerning the parts that are working, you know, of like, when are the moments where I feel clear in my desire? When are the moments where I feel unclear in my desire? It's almost, for me, having different buckets to put things into, to kind of parse things apart, right? So if I'm having a desire and I'm worried that it's going to be detrimental to someone, like being able to parse that out of like, which part of this is trauma? Which part of this is valid? Which part of this is conditioning? Which part of this is just my own sweet, tender, authentic desire? You know, which part of this is beautiful? How would I know if it was detrimental? And what would I do about it if it was? Like, how would I repair with that? How would I, like, what's my plan? You know, because I think that piece of it, of like, when we're trying to trust our bodies or our desires, or any part of our sexuality after hard things have happened, like that building of trust with ourselves is about knowing that we're going to listen to the information that's coming from our bodies, that we're going to learn somatic awareness, practice somatic awareness, and that we're committed to right relationship with ourselves and others. That that if we have internalized any perpetrator stuff, totally common, and that like we, just because we did that, like does not mean that that's us. Like if you internalize homophobia, just because you internalize it doesn't mean you're, you know, it's not yours. It was a layer of shame that was put on you, and it's just that constant weeding out, constantly like looking for it, and it's exhausting, you know, but I think it's well worth it, because getting to be free in our flirtations and our desires is beautiful, and we get to have that no matter what's happened to us. So yeah, I hope this has been helpful. We're going to wrap up. I just want to tell you, so you'll be getting a replay of this. It'll be up on our YouTube channel. Next month, our free monthly webinar is on STDs and stigma and breaking free of shame. And so we'll be talking about like how to live with an STD, how to talk about it, how to be sexual with STDs. And that's August 6th. And you can register on our website. And we have a few events that are coming up that are really cool and beautiful. On July 9th, we have Performing Eros, Exhibition and Voyeurism Through a Tantric Lens. I've been to this event several times. It's led by TT Baum, who's a really beautiful, fantastic cis gay male, queer male facilitator, who really holds a beautiful space. That's July 9th. And TT will be doing Lightning in a Bottle, Conscious Masturbation for All Bodies on July 23rd. And on July 26th, Victoria Raveni will be doing solo communal erotic embodiment practice, also known as orgasmic yoga or O-yoga. And so you can register for all of those on the wellcelium.org website, and hope that we see you in some events and courses and upcoming webinars. So thanks so much for the gift of your attention today. I hope this was helpful. And remember, 3 to 5 people for the next 7 days. And if you want to write to me about like what you learned, that would be fun for me to hear. So be well, everyone, and see you next month. Bye.